Hey there, folks. If you've been looking to dive into the sci-fi fantasy world of Starfinder, but perhaps felt a bit daunted by the full rule set, the Starfinder Beginner Box is here to save the day. So Ryan and I are going to be reviewing the Beginner Box for you today. Brian and I are trying a slightly different format with this review. We'd love to know what you think of the format. We're just trying some things that allow us to, parent and make videos at the same time with a toddler. Whee! Now, with Starfinder 2nd Edition on the horizon and a playtest that's supposed to be available at Gen Con 2020, it is the perfect time to get a taste of what this universe has to offer. If the changes from the 1st edition to 2nd edition are similar to what Paizo did with Pathfinder, it will be pretty easy to transition to the new edition, especially if you are working off of the simplified rule set in the Beginner Box.
When it comes to the Starfinder Beginner Box, I'll be talking about what I think of it in terms of just a science fiction setting. And I gotta tell you, I really like it. For me, Starfinder really feels like it belongs among the stars, and that is absolutely fantastic.
Before I get into the specifics of the Beginner Box, let's chat a bit about Starfinder as a system and setting. Starfinder is an extension of the Pathfinder universe set in a future post-apocalypse where mankind and the other fantasy races have been forced to go explore the stars because their homeworld is no longer habitable. This game is very much science fiction fantasy. It features advanced technology, magic, and space travel. You see all of the traditional high fantasy races along with some new alien species and classes that have their own unique abilities and skills.
I was a little skeptical at first. I'll be completely honest. I've played a lot of Pathfinder over the years, and it's not always my go-to system, but I think that it's a really solid system, and there's a lot of really great things about it. And the reason I say I was skeptical is because I was worried it was just going to feel like Pathfinder reskinned, that it was just going to be this familiar setting of fantasy Pathfinder set in space. Now, I'm not the most familiar with Pathfinder, so maybe if you play it all the time, it will feel a little bit more familiar to you. But for me, this doesn't feel like Pathfinder in space at all. It doesn't feel like they took a fantasy game and then just happened to put it in space, on a space station or on a ship. It feels like a legitimate science fiction space travel RPG, and that is where it was always meant to live. And for the folks at Paizo, I say great job. That was a tall order, and I think that they did it very well.
So the rule set for Starfinder does a very good job of blending the science fiction and fantasy elements all into one game where neither one feels overpowered. You have a lot of different choices to choose from, and I think it supports a number of different kinds of space science fiction fantasy games, whether it's more space exploration, think like Star Trek, or perhaps a little bit more space horror, or even like a dungeon crawl that's based more on an alien planet or an asteroid.
In a lot of tabletop settings, anytime you introduce firearms to a setting, it kind of runs away with the show. Why would you ever use a broadsword when you have a shotgun? And with Starfinder, the different types of guns that are there seem so incredibly normal and commonplace. They're going to be what you use, and it's fine. You know, when you look at the damage that they put out, of course you're going to be using your phasers and your pistols and your slug throwers. There are the long arms that some of your characters can have, and your shotguns and your rifles, and that's absolutely fine. It is also set up that it makes sense why so many of your characters will have melee weapons on them. So the game does a really nice job of balancing why you have firearms and why you have melee weapons as well. And I don't think that it makes combat lopsided, the fact that firearms exist. And I think it makes, it makes sense, and combat will still certainly be lots of fun. It's just going to be the type of combat that begins and sometimes stays primarily ranged. And I don't think that there's a problem with that. It might be new for some people running the game and for some folks playing the game, but I think that that's something that's pretty quick and easy to accommodate for.
Okay, let's talk about what is in the beginner box. You have a 96-page Hero's Handbook detailing character creation and general rules for playing the game, plus a short solo adventure, a 96-page Game Master's Guide containing an adventure, bestiary, and GM advice, a complete set of 7 dice, just over 80 full-color pawns, 24 plastic pawn bases, 6 pre-generated character sheets, 6 blank character sheets, 6 player aid cards for quick reference rules, and a durable, reusable, double-sided flip mat. That's a lot. Let's get into a bunch of the individual pieces. I really do like that there is a dedicated book for the players and a dedicated book for the game master. It just makes it a lot easier for the players to be able to pick up exactly what they need, and then the game master can look over the player book to know the rules, but then more of the things the game master is going to be focused on is in their own book. The player guide is really well organized and laid out. It gives you a simplified introduction to the Starfinder rules that I think is very beginner friendly if you're brand new to RPGs, as well as if you're a veteran player who wants to skim through the parts that you're more familiar with to get to the details about the specific Starfinder system and setting. Now, within the simplified rules, the skill system is the one that I noticed kind of has the most differences between it and the full Starfinder rules. It seems like they kind of combined a couple of skills and maybe had a few that are less specialized. I think this is great as it makes it easier for especially new players to just not have so many skills to pick from, but it does mean that when you're transitioning to the full system, it might take a little bit extra time to remember and figure out what skill is it that you need to use. The beginner box allows your character to level up to level 4, which I think gives you a good solid foundation to explore the game's mechanics and doesn't take up a whole lot of space with levels that you probably aren't going to get to in a beginner game.
Looking at the denizens of who inhabits this world, the galaxy, the universe of Starfinder, the alien creatures, the different races that you meet are varied and wondrous and fantastic. They don't just feel like space elves and space orcs and space dwarves. I think it's really cool. They feel like very much their own thing, that it makes sense who they are and the cultures that they come from. And they do tend to kind of get away from always being a monolith, that all of the creatures from a certain planet or of a certain race are always the exact same. Certainly, that may be a part of the creativity of a specific GM that you have, or even a player playing a member of that race. But I think even just in the beginner's box, it sets you up to have some of that variety, which is really cool. And even the Vesk, I think, are a really interesting race, that they're set up as this original antagonist, and now they're around, and some of the tension might still be high in some places, but they're much more common, and they're much more allies, and they don't just feel like space orcs by any means. At least, I don't think that they do.
There's even a solo adventure, which I think is really fantastic, and I want to see more beginner introductory guides have, because this is great for somebody who might not have a group ready but still wants to experience the game, or for players to all play through on their own to get a sense of the rules of the game before playing with their group, or even building a character. I think the order of putting the solo adventure before the main rules, as well as the character creation, was really smart on Paizo's end, because it encourages people to play through this solo adventure, and then they may actually like change their mind on what kind of character they want to play once you've actually played the game. I know I've had situations where I played a couple of sessions and realized, oh, once I have a good grasp of the rules, I actually wanted to play this kind of character rather than the one I picked. Another thing I generally appreciated is the character sheets. While the black background and some of the choices for it can be a little hard on the eyes, the sheets are very well designed, especially for beginners. They include page numbers for easy reference, a guide to the dice with pictures, which is great when you're sitting there going, which one's the D12? And a clear layout. It's easy to find everything you need. There are also 6 pre-made characters, each combining one of the 6 races, themes, and classes, which I think makes it really great if you want to just jump right into the action and not have to fuss around with actual character creation. Now, there are 6 blank ones if you want to create your own character. The player aid cards are another highlight. They have conditions on one side and a list of actions you can take on your turn on the other. For beginner players, this is fantastic because then you aren't having to remember, wait, what is it that I can do? And even for experienced players, like I have made my own like cheat sheet cards or printed them off, things that I found on the internet. These are just super great, fantastic, would recommend these for anyone. Plus, I really like the fact that everything in the box is cross-referenced with the page numbers that particular rule lands on. It makes it really easy to find the rules, to look up the expanded, what is this ability, or what does this condition fully do beyond just a short description. It just makes it a breeze. I want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean. If you enjoy our videos, please consider heading over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and becoming a patron today. All right, let's get back to the review. The layout of the GM guide is interesting, starting with the adventure itself. This makes it certainly easy to find and get started, but I think I'd actually recommend GMs take a look at Chapter 2 on game mastering before diving in. I certainly know some people who would just start with the adventure, and there is some advice on how to run the game mixed into the adventure, and the way the adventure is set up does kind of teach you how to be a GM as you're playing it. It gets more complicated as it goes on, and also is a great way of teaching players how to play the game as it gets more complicated as it goes on. But I really think that the second chapter on game mastering has some really good advice in there that maybe you want to start with and then actually go back and read the adventure. Now, the included adventure is fun. It's space-themed dungeon crawl.
When it comes to a science fiction setting, Absalom Station is great. It is full of a rich history. There's a lot of people there that have been there for a very long time, cultures and communities. It is well lived in, and there's so much diversity, from the Eye, the big central area, out to the spires, the ring, and the different arms and sections. It's a really great place, and it feels like there's been so much thought put into that rich history. It's just as well thought out and deep and steeped with lore as anything that you would get playing an RPG set in a system or a world like DS9 or Babylon 5 or any other sort of IP that exists out there that is meant to be a space science fiction setting. So again, I think that that's great. And with the beginner's box, you could absolutely run something as a GM that really lets you stay right there on Absalom Station. And I think that that's great.
However, I was hoping for more space, the exploration and maybe some social encounters and ship combat to really capture the Starfinder essence.
The ships really are a bit hand-wavy. It even says it in the books for the beginner's box, which is that Look, the ships exist to get you where you need to go. There's no rules that really need to be followed. There's no rolls or checks that need to happen. Here's a roll that you can make to see how long does it take to get from one planet to another, but you're going to get there just fine. Don't worry about it. And there's no ship-to-ship combat or anything like that. In the larger expanded rules, all of that stuff might exist, but that's not what we're reviewing. We're reviewing the beginner's box. I like all of that kind of stuff. It's not in the beginner's box. Oh well.
But I guess if you're presenting people with, here's a beginner box, you're just not going to be able to include everything. Just, with a space game, I would have expected to see just more space.
One of the smartest things that I think Starfinder does is the gap. It's how it deals with, what happens to the past? What happened to, all of the things from the Pathfinder era and all of that. And very condensed, the gap is millennia long or hundreds of years. I don't remember. It's in the book. It's fine. I don't know. It's this idea that throughout all of reality and the different the different worlds and in the Fey realm and the material plane and even affecting the gods, history cannot be recorded correctly or remembered even by the types of creatures that were alive back then. And so we don't know. We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened to all of that stuff. And even in the book it says all of the denizens of this world have just collectively decided the past is the past and we're going to work towards our future. And I think that it's a nice little way of kind of saying directly to the GMs and the players, hey, look, trying to figure out what happened in the fantasy setting to get us here, that's not the point. We're in this setting now. Let's be in this setting. Let that be your focus. They do a much more eloquent job of explaining it, and it's really cool. So yeah, the gap is done really well.
The GM guide also includes basic rules for creating your own adventures. It has some encounter ideas, terrain info, a decent-sized bestiary, and even info on how to create your own creatures. Awesome. The Where to Go From Here section gives a brief overview of other Starfinder books and adventure paths, which I think is really helpful for those who are looking to expand their experiences with official, adventures or books. And I also like that they have a couple of, adventure paths for ideas to continue the adventure that's in this beginner box if you want to go beyond what the written adventure includes. So with all of these tools, you can potentially run a small campaign just using what's in this box. The two-sided flip mat, one side for the included adventure and the other has a blank grid, and the high-quality tokens that have just great art, as usual, Paizo, awesome, just add to the immersive experience. Some tokens even have variant art showing different genders, and I noticed the ones that are similar have colored dots, which I think is meant to help keep track of those individual creatures. That makes keeping track of Space Goblin 1, 2, and 3 just so much easier, as I can be it's the red Space Goblin, it's the green Space Goblin. And then there's also just a basic dice set. It's easy to read, functional, it's nothing special, but you have dice, so you can play. Now, probably everybody wants their own dice, but there's at least one set. Overall, the quality of the components is top-notch. Everything fits really snugly in the box, perhaps a little too snugly, as I had to, flick the box over to get a couple of the items out. And at $40, the beginner box offers a lot of bang for your buck, especially, I think, compared to similar starter sets like those for D&D, which often run I think around $30, but they have fewer components and I think just also less lower quality when it comes to the handbooks. It tends to be just paper, whereas the material of it is is laminated, not quite cardstock. That feels like these books are really going to hold up to being like passed, maybe even chucked around the table, having multiple people looking through it, and, you know, something you can even toss in your bag if you're taking it on the go and don't want to take the whole box with you. In conclusion, the Starfinder Beginner Box is a fantastic entry point into this system and setting. Whether you're a seasoned RPG player or a complete newbie, this box has something to offer. I will say we are also planning on taking a look at some of the Starfinder playtest material when it becomes available, so keep an eye out for a video on that. So have you played the Starfinder Beginner Box? Are you thinking about picking it up, or are you going to be waiting for the second edition to come out? Let's chat about it more in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye!